What would make a full-grown bull, 800 kilograms of muscle and instinct, break through a reinforced gate not once, not twice, but 11 nights in a row? And what if every single time he escaped, he walked the exact same road, to the exact same place, and stood outside the exact same building in complete silence, as though he was keeping a promise no one had asked him to make? This is not a story about a dangerous animal or a farm gone wrong. It is a story about loyalty so deep and so stubborn that it refused to be contained by fences, distance, or even the complete absence of any instruction. It is a story about what happens when a bond between a human being and an animal is tested by sudden separation, and the animal simply refuses to accept it. Scientists will tell you, cattle are not capable of complex emotional attachment. After you hear this story, you may want to ask them to reconsider. Manuel Azevedo was 71 years old and had worked the same land his entire life. His farm sat on a gentle hillside outside Viseu, in the northern interior of Portugal, about 40 hectares of cork oak and pasture that had belonged to his family for 3 generations. He lived alone since his wife Rosa passed 6 years earlier. His daughter Anna called every evening at 8. His son lived in Porto and visited on holidays. The farm was his company, his routine, and the only place in the world where Manuel felt completely like himself. He had 14 cattle, but there was one animal that was different from the rest. Turo, which simply means bull in Portuguese, because Manuel was not a man who complicated things, had been born on that farm 11 years earlier. Manuel had been there for the birth, a difficult one, and had stayed through the night to make sure the calf survived. From the very beginning, there was something between them that the other farmhands noticed but couldn't quite describe. Turo would come to the fence when Manuel called. He would stand calm and still when Manuel checked his hooves or tended to small injuries, things that normally required 2 or 3 men with a larger animal. He followed Manuel along the fence line during the morning rounds, the way a dog follows its owner down a street. Manuel talked to him, not in any self-conscious way, just the running commentary of a man who spends most of his days alone. The weather, the condition of the pasture, whether the cork harvest would be good this year. Turo would stand and listen, with his large dark eyes steady and patient, his breath slow in the morning air. In early March, Manuel collapsed while replacing a fence post on the far edge of the property. A neighboring farmer found him 2 hours later. He had suffered a serious cardiac episode and was airlifted to Hospital de São Teotonio in Viseu, 32 kilometers from the farm. He was alive, but his condition was critical, and the doctors were honest with Anna. Recovery would be slow, and the first 2 weeks were uncertain. Anna arranged for a farmhand named Dario to manage the property. Dario was experienced and capable. The animals were fed, watered, and cared for. Everything was in order, except Turo. On the very first night Manuel was in hospital, Dario arrived at the farm the next morning to find the iron gate of Turo's enclosure pushed completely off one of its hinges. The bull was gone. Dario and a neighbor spent 3 hours searching before finding Turo, standing calmly on the road shoulder, about 2 kilometers toward Viseu, as though simply waiting for someone to tell him he was going the right direction. They brought him back. They reinforced the gate with a chain. The next morning, gone again, further down the road this time. Same direction. By the 4th night, Dario set up a simple camera. What he saw when he reviewed the footage was a bull that waited until well after midnight, worked the gate latch with his nose and forehead, with what could only be described as methodical patience, and then walked, calmly, steadily, without running, straight down the road toward Viseu. 11 nights in a row, always the same direction, always the same road, always toward the hospital where Manuel was lying in a bed 32 kilometers away. Dario didn't know what to think. He called Anna. Anna didn't know what to think either. She mentioned it to one of the nurses almost as an afterthought, more as an odd story than anything serious. The nurse told the attending doctor. The doctor told his colleague. Within 2 days, the story had moved quietly through the hospital the way unexpected things do. Person to person, in corridors with lowered voices and slightly raised eyebrows. Something felt impossible about it, and yet Dario's camera footage made it very hard to argue with. A veterinary behaviorist from the University of Trás-os-Montes e Alto Douro was contacted by a journalist who had heard the story through the hospital. She drove out to the farm, reviewed the footage, spoke with Dario at length, and spent 2 hours observing Turo in the enclosure. Her explanation was careful and grounded, but it was not dismissive. Cattle, she said, are far more emotionally sophisticated than most people understand. They form strong individual bonds with specific humans. particularly those who have been present during vulnerable moments like birth, illness, or injury. These bonds activate the same neurological reward pathways observed in other highly social mammals. When a bonded human suddenly disappears, cattle can exhibit acute separation distress, reduced appetite, increased agitation, repetitive behavior, and crucially, attempts to locate the missing individual. Turo's sense of smell, like all cattle, was extraordinary, capable of detecting scent trails across several kilometers under the right wind conditions. The road to Viseu was the road Manuel's vehicle had traveled hundreds of times. The scent of fuel, rubber, and the specific human scent Turo had known for 11 years would have been layered into that road over years of daily passage. He wasn't wandering randomly. He was following the most familiar trail he knew, in the direction it had always led, toward Manuel. The behaviorist paused before her final point. There was also, she said quietly, the question of what cattle detect when their bonded human is unwell. Multiple studies have documented cattle responding to elevated stress hormones and changed body chemistry in humans they are closely bonded to, growing restless, vocalizing more, seeking proximity. Manuel's cardiac episode had happened suddenly, but the days leading up to it, the physical strain and fatigue that precede such events, would have been chemically present in every interaction Manuel had with Turo that final week. Turo had not left the farm after Manuel collapsed. He had been trying to leave before it. Increasingly agitated in the days prior, according to Dario's recollection, he simply hadn't gotten through the gate until the night Manuel was gone. Anna sat in the hospital corridor and read the behaviorist's notes. Then she walked into her father's room and held his hand for a long time, without saying anything. Manuel spent 23 days in hospital. On the day he was discharged, Anna drove him home, along the same road Turo had walked 11 times in the dark. Manuel was quiet for most of the journey. At the gate of the farm, Dario was waiting, and beside him, Turo stood at the fence. Manuel got out of the car slowly, still careful with his movements. He walked to the fence. Turo pressed his large head forward against the iron bars. Manuel put both hands on the animal's face, that broad, warm, familiar face, and stood there for a long time. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Manuel made a full recovery over the following months. He reduced his physical workload on the farm, as the doctors instructed, and Anna arranged for more regular help. But every morning, without fail, Manuel still did his rounds, and every morning, Turo still walked the fence line beside him. Same pace, same patience, same steady dark eyes. The gate has a new latch now, a good one. It has never been tested. Manuel tells people, when they ask about Turo, that he is just a bull, a good bull, a strong bull, an old bull now. But sometimes, in the evening, when the light comes low across the pasture and Turo stands still at the far end of the field, looking toward the road, Manuel watches him for a while before calling him in. He knows what that direction means, and he is grateful every single day that something on this farm knew it before he did. Some bonds don't need language to be real. Some loyalty doesn't need a door to find its way home. If this story moves something in you, pass it on to someone who needs to be reminded today that they are not as alone as they think. And if you want more stories like this one, you already know where to find us.